Hello and welcome to completing your Management Development Questionnaire MDQ self-assessment. When you're finished with this assignment, you will have completed a self-assessment of leadership competencies. You'll be able to determine from such, after scoring and interpretation, what your levels are with specific to 20 leadership competencies. Okay, you need the following materials as shown on this slide to complete all 10 steps. Please make sure that you have all these materials. They were provided to you in class, or if you missed that particular class, you may obtain them from Dr. Zelko at her office. Okay, so let us begin with step number 1, which is taking the MDQ questionnaire. Please read the information and listen to the instructions that I will give you. I will show you a sample on the next slide highlighting the actual steps. As you can see here though, here's a snippet in the left box of what your questionnaire will look like on its face page with the directions. And then the box to the right here is a sample of just 3 questions of the 80 that you will be completing in this questionnaire. So let us begin, and I'll demonstrate this to you by the next slide. Here are the steps and an example listed above. You're going to read the pair of statements, and you're going to determine of the 2 statements within each question set, which do you do more of at work, and circle that item as more. Once you've done that, then for the more item, you will select L or H, low or high, whether you feel it is a high or a low priority for your development. And then you'll return to the less statement and select again L or H for it, whether you feel it is a high or a low priority for development. Now let me show you how this works. In the first question pair, there are 2 statements. As you can see here, guides the performance of others and builds and maintains effective relationships. I'm going to select builds and maintains effective relationship as the thing that I do more at work than the other, guides the performance of others. Now that I've selected that, I need to determine, is this a priority for development, high or low? In this case, you can see that I selected L under the more category. And in this particular case, for building and maintaining effective relationships, it's a low priority of development for me because I think I have a lot going, but of course I could probably always use a little bit more development. Now I return to the statement above, which was my lesser statement, guides the performance of others, and you can see here I selected that it is a high priority for me to do development in this area. Certainly I do some of that at work, but I feel that I need a lot more to do. Let's look at question set number 2 and take it again as an example. In reading these 2, I select the one that I do more of at work is that I adapt quickly to new situations. In assessing, do I need development as a high or a low priority for this, I've determined that it is a high priority for me. I've run into a lot of different situations where I don't adapt quickly or I don't do it very well, and I think I really need development in that area. Looking at the other statement, which was my lesser, is prepared to do whatever it takes, I've selected that sure, I need to be able to do that, and I have a high development area priority in that particular one. This is how you will complete the questionnaire, reading each question set and selecting from the 2 which is the more, rating that one, and then returning to the lesser even in that statement set and rating that one as well. Take time to read this over and note to the far right that there are some caption boxes for you, just showing again by my selections that I've made what that actually means. So take time to do this and then when you continue on by taking the entire questionnaire, which is your step 2. So you'll want to pause now, and you'll return when you've completed all of the choices in the questionnaire. See you soon. Back. You've now completed your questionnaire by making all of your choices. In this next step, step 3, you're going to transfer your selections from your questionnaire onto this response sheet. So make sure that you have the response sheet handy. Now, taking your questionnaire sheets and this response sheet, you want to take each question set. As you can see here, this is just a sample. They're all numbered 1 all the way through 80, which is what you had completed in your questionnaire. And you're now going to, preferably with a pencil, you're going to transfer what your L's and your H's were for each of those question sets, both for the more statement and for the less. As you see here, this is a sample where many have been shaded in, just to give you an example. So this is a 1-for-1 transfer. Each question set to the response sheet, color them in. Please darken them in quite a bit because this is a pressure sensitive form, and there is a sheet attached to this that soon you will be detaching, but do not detach that now. Go ahead and complete this activity, filling in all of the boxes respective of what you scored or your choices were in your questionnaire. I'll see you in a few minutes. Well, welcome back. If you've completed the entire transfer, you're now at step 4. In step 4, you're going to pull the MDQ response sheet, that sheet you just completed where you transferred all of your choices over onto the sheet. You're going to take this and pull it apart carefully so that you may obtain the second page, called the scoring key. If you look at the illustration here on the slide, you see the response sheet on the left and then the scoring table on the right, which will be underneath when you tear the set apart. What you'll note now in looking at the scoring table is you have all those little darkened boxes, but what's actually taken place is now it reveals 160 items scored. So the 80 you originally did and the choices you made have now turned into 160 items. You'll be using the scoring table to move on to the next step. Pause for a minute and go ahead and tear apart the pressure sensitive set and obtain the scoring table. Once you've torn the set apart and you're looking at the scoring table, just make sure that the boxes, when you're looking at them on the scoring table, they're darkened enough that you can actually see the choices now shown. You might need to darken them in a little bit more because you will be using the scoring table. So if you need to do that, take a minute and go ahead and do that now, and we'll return in a minute. Well, welcome back. You've completed step 4 where you've torn the sheets apart and you're looking at your scoring key. Welcome back. In step 5, you're going to take the scoring key, that second page of the transfer set, and you're going to use that to now transfer over that information onto this document, the scoring table. Take a minute if you need to and obtain the scoring table. You should have in front of you now the scoring key and this new document, the scoring table, which you'll be using to make transfers of the information from the scoring key. Let's take a minute just to orientate ourselves to this particular document, the scoring table. If you will look along the left column, you will see the dimensions, or what we will call them, competencies as well. This is where now you're going to be taking scores from the key and moving them over relative to each of these dimensions or competencies. What I'd like you to do is take a real close look at the scoring table. You should see, in looking at all of the little boxes, a very faint number in each box. Those faint numbers are very important because when you make the transfer, of the information, you're going to look back at the scoring table for the particular number that you're seeing in the box on the scoring table. So for instance, imagine you're seeing a faint number in initiative in the first box. That number, then, you would look back to your scoring key with all the rub downs, find that number, and then you will put that number into that box here. We're going to demo this in just a couple of minutes. When you're all done transferring and all of the dimensions or competencies have numbers along their horizontal line, you will note that in the far right column, second to the end, is the raw total. You'll wind up adding up all of those numbers that you've now put in over top of the little shaded number to a total that you will then put into the raw total boxes. Again, we'll take this slowly and we'll move on to the next slide. Just take a minute to really look at the scoring table and notice all those very light numbers in all of the boxes. All right, let's look at an example about how you're going to move information from your scoring key to your scoring table. So this is an example. If you look closely at the scoring table, see the snippet below, you'll note that in each box, as we mentioned before, there is a very faint light number shown. Let's look at one. Look at risk-taking. Where that blue dot is, if you look close at the scoring table, you will see a light faint number, and that number happens to be 48. So now, knowing that that number is 48, you will then go to the scoring key, the second snippet below, and you'll look for the number 48. And you'll see there it is. Once you've located the 48 corresponding to the 48 on the scoring table, you'll now look at what the score was that you had selected. In this case, you selected number 1. So then you put a number 1 into that space on the scoring table next to that faint 48, the number 1. You've now transferred one of those. You'll continue this process for all of the faint numbers on the scoring table, pulling the information from the scoring key as we've just shown you and putting that into the boxes. I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and do that, and you might even want to replay this so that you're really familiar with what you're about to do. I'll see you in a few minutes. Well, welcome. You should have now filled in your entire scoring table sheet. Much like you see here as a snippet, all these penciled numbers, which was the transfer of the information from the scoring key. If you look here, what you'll notice is we've circled a particular dimension or competency row with all the numbers from left to right. And you add up all of those, and that will become the raw total score that you'll put in the box under the raw total. You can see here where we've indicated what all of those numbers were, and that in this case on that initiative it equals 21. So take time now to go ahead and add up horizontally all the numbers for each dimension or competency and place that respective number into the raw total score. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then you'll return when you're done. Welcome back. If you've got all your raw totals in, the other thing that you can do now is add up the subtotals. You'll note that below the dimension of initiative, risk-taking, creativity and innovation, and adaptability is a KF1 called managing change. Later this will make some more sense to you, but for right now, what that is meaning is the cluster of the 4 competencies or dimension above roll into a larger competency called managing change. So you can now go ahead and add up the raw totals in each of the dimensions into the blue box for the subtotal relative to that larger competency. Go ahead and take a minute to do this. Welcome back. Now you should have your scoring table completely done with the exception of the far right column called the STEN score. So just take a minute to make sure you have completed all of the other boxes filled in and you've got the subtotals for the larger competencies that are in the bold print. So now here you are at step 7. At 7 you'll be using the table 5-9, so make sure you have that document available, and you will need your scoring table, the one where you had transferred all the information over and came up with your raw scores for this particular next few steps. What you'll be doing, which is what this table here 5-9 is all about, is that you're going to be taking the raw scores and translating them into STEN scores. It just takes the larger numbers and moves them down into smaller numbers from 1 to 10. Here, as noted, are the STEN scores. If you look below these STEN scores, for every dimension or competency, there is a range of numbers that move from left to right along that respective dimension. For instance, you will see here in managing change 32 to 57, and then it moves all the way up to 104 to 128. These will relate to your scores on your scoring table in the raw totals, and you'll use them to translate. You're still in step 7, and this is where you are going to complete the STEN score column right here. You're going to take the raw totals, translate that into a STEN score using that table 5-9. Here is the scoring table that you had completed with your raw scores, and this is you filling in the STEN scores. So let's take this and look. You're going to take the dimension or competency initiative M1, and you have in this case a raw total of 21. So you come over to the M5-9 table, look for initiative, and then look for 21, and you see it's right here. Therefore, this STEN is a 7. And then you put a 7 here. You'll do that for all of your raw totals, translating them into the STENs. Be very careful and make sure that you take the competency, find the right one, because the table varies over here. Find the right one, and then its corresponding raw score number, and then translate it into the STEN. I'm going to give you some time to take care of that now, and then you'll return shortly. Well, welcome back. Having completed step 7, you should have your scoring table fully complete at this point with raw scores and STEN scores. Now you're moving on into step 8, and you will need to obtain the document called the profile sheet, and here you can see what that looks like. You'll be using this sheet to transfer finally the last information in the transfer process onto this sheet. If you take a look at this sheet, you will notice that you have in the far left column all of the competencies listed. You have some numbers running across the top, which is the STEN numbers. And then in the far right column, you have a description of that particular competency dimension. There's some other information on this sheet, but we'll make note of that later. Right now, please make sure that you have the profile sheet, the sheet handy, and that you have your scoring table that you just completed ready for moving on to step 9. So here we are now at step 9. You're going to be taking your scoring table, that far right column of the STEN scores, and you're going to be putting that now onto your profile sheet here. Again, what you'll need to know and do is you want to look back at your scoring table and look for the initiative, dimension, or competency. Look for the STEN score that you have written in that far right box, and then find that STEN score along here and go ahead and circle it. You'll do this for all of the dimensions completing this sheet. This should take you only a couple of minutes, and I hope you find this by far the easiest of many of the steps that you have just completed. So here you are now at the end, and really congratulations. Having just completed the last sheet, you have completed the scoring of your MDQ self-assessment. With your completed profile, you now have a final document illustrating all of your leadership competencies and their strengths. Please continue to step 10, which will now take you to understanding your leadership competencies. To do step 10, you will need to obtain the MDQ Development Competency Descriptions information. This is a packet of 21 pages. If you are not given that in a hard copy, this can be obtained in Blackboard as a source in this particular week's assignment. In step 10, you'll just take your profile with all the circled dots now and all the competencies and their short descriptions on that document, and you will read the information in this packet of 21 pages, which will give you more detailed information about the competencies. You want to take note of the information pertaining to your top competency dimension strengths. These are your highest STEM scores, 9s and 10s, and your potential competency dimensions needing development, your lowest STEM scores of 1, 2, or 3. Once you have read through the description information and identified your highest STEM scores and your lowest STEM scores per the competencies, you have completed this assignment. Please note, very, very important, bring all of your MDQ sheets and your MDQ development competency description information packet to class. We will be using this information in class. Please make sure you bring all of it. Thank you, and we'll see you in class.